The purpose of stories, illustrations, parables is to enable the listener, the audience, to go from the familiar to the unfamiliar, from the known to the unknown. You know what a river is, you know what a building is, you know what a tree is, you know what a canyon is. Familiar sights, they're known to your mind. So when you hear a story about a river or a tree, you can put the two together. You can see when you're told that a tree must be watered, it must be given sunshine, very easily and automatically you sense the illustration that this is what we have to do in the inner spiritual life. So that's one purpose. Simply to shift from what you already know, which is easy to understand, to something that is not so easy to understand. And the familiar makes the unfamiliar understandable. That's one reason. Another reason, as you have seen in many of the stories and illustrations we've had, is to put yourself in the place of the central figure. And as you've heard these parables, stories, you have sensed, have you not, that's me. That's me who's lost out in the desert. That's me who's out in a ship and there's no steering wheel on it and I seem to be at the mercy of the storm and of the currents. We know this is a spiritual class, so we say, that's me out on that boat. And then the solution comes, the man builds his own steering wheel or hoists the sail which guides him back to port. And there's one thing about all our illustrations in this class that should make you very happy, which is that they all have a happy ending. Because at the end of every story, truth says, this is it. Now you've heard an illustration, you've been given truths. Now all you have to do is do the work connected with it. There's no such thing as an unhappy ending to any spiritual parable. Anyone who listens and applies can use them and change himself in the one way, the only way that's worth changing, which is inwardly. Oh, so that all the confusion, the chaos that's churning around inside here, and the heartache, so that that is taken away by the truth that always stands supreme and powerful behind every story. And every illustration you hear includes in one way or another certain fundamentals. And one of them is, try to understand what it means to get out of your own way. Try to understand that. Because if you don't, you're going to misinterpret the story, and worse, you're going to misinterpret your life here on earth. You won't understand why you're really here. Because if I can get myself out of the way, myself being everything that I've accumulated up here, and in my whole system, everything I've accumulated, I have to see that that is simply a collection that is not really me. Now I'm going to tell you another story this morning. Keep in mind what I've already said, and I know that without any urging on my part, you will see yourself as the central figure. And then, as I just said, it has a beautifully happy ending, if you persist. All right, there was once a man who sat at home a lot. He was a recluse. He was afraid of the world out there, even though he did go out shopping and go to work. He's really pretty much afraid of it. And he put on a false front of being cheerful, as people do, of being in command of himself, which he didn't believe in at all. But the world more and more seemed to be attacking him, surrounding him, pressuring him, keeping him in the center of this insane circle of viciousness and of confusion. So more and more he stayed home, went out only when necessary, and began to build up his own little world made of his fantasies. Fantasies of being wealthy, sex fantasies of having that woman. All which left him being a very sick, inward-turned, unpleasant, self-tormenting human being. And in his desperation to throw off the burden, he began to think of certain things he could do to relieve the awful pain. It was there. No matter where he went or what he did, he carried the pain with him. And he sensed but didn't understand that he was indeed the very pain itself. He and his pain were one thing. That's all he was. That was his identity, one of suffering. And a lot, listen to this please, a lot of concealed hatred and hostility. Oh, he burned inside. And oh, he pained inside from that burning. So one day he was standing at his window and he saw a pretty girl walk by outside the sidewalk. And his heart leaped a little bit. She looked very desirable. And he knew her slightly. He had met her casually over the past year or two. And he knew where she lived. And so, in great contradiction about it, and yet with a great desire, he decided to write her a letter. So he sat down and wrote her a letter asking her for a date. And he looked at the letter and he wasn't quite sure if that was the right way to put it. So he tore it up, started out again, wrote it again. He was never really happy with the way he phrased the invitation. And beyond that fear, in back of that fear rather, there's also the fear of even putting a stamp on it and addressing it and mailing it, dropping it into the mailbox. He couldn't phone her. He didn't have the courage to do that. He couldn't go up to her and talk to her into a casual conversation. An impersonal letter was the best he could do. So he wrote the letter over several times, left it laying on his writing table there for several days, wanting to go ahead, not wanting to go ahead, torn apart inwardly. And finally he decided, all right, I'll mail it and see what happens. So he wrote his final version, sealed the letter, addressed it, put a stamp on it, walked out to the mailbox, avoiding her if she came by again. He looked to see whether she was walking by. So he walked a couple blocks down, dropped it in the mailbox. On the way back, he saw her coming down the street, so he went around the block and avoided her and came home. He didn't sleep at all that night. Pounding into his mind was the thought, there's that letter in the mailbox, a big steel hard box. There's no way I could get it back if I want to. Once it gets in the hands of the post office, it's their property for a while. And then his mind went to her slitting the letter, opening it and reading it. And he tried to picture her facial expression when she got it. All this tormented him so he couldn't sleep at all. Rather, he had nightmares. And it haunted him for the next 2 or 3 days, and his imagination went into all possibilities. And of course, the most pleasant one would be that he pictured himself doing it, of course, didn't he? He pictured himself seeing the mailman come down the street and drop the letter in the box. And he could see from the color of it, this is all his imagination, he could see from the color of it that he usually doesn't get letters with a nice, pretty pink envelope like that. Maybe that's her. And then he pictured himself in the fantasy going out and getting it, and there was her name up there, and he opened it. And she wrote back, she started the sentence with, "Dear Bill, and I'd be delighted to have dinner with you." That was one possibility. Another one was that she wouldn't answer at all, which would be pretty hard to take. Finally, after a week, he went out to his mailbox. This is really happening now to him. Went out to the mailbox, and there was a letter. And there was, up in the left-hand corner, which he looked at first, don't you do the same? He looked up, and there was the address which he recognized as hers. Her name wasn't there. He wished it had been, but it wasn't. Just the return address. And nervously, he walked in the house, and he thought to himself, I think I'll set it on the table for a little bit and enjoy what's going to happen before it happens. Prolong the pleasure that way. But he couldn't keep that up very long, so he got the letter opener, slid it open. You know how it goes. You slit it open, and you pull the letter envelope apart, and you reach in, and you pull it out, and it's folded, and you shake it, and you go like that, and no, dear. Not even his name. There was no salutation in the letter at all. And the letter was very unkind, he thought. It was very abrupt. What it was a rejection. What it was a very harsh, brief little note, one line, in which the girl suggested that he was a little creep. And after dying inwardly from the experience, all of a sudden his heartache turned to rage, right? And he put the letter back in the envelope and he ripped it apart and threw it away. And did as many pieces as he could, raging as he did so. And he said to himself, what a horrible life. You write a nice, polite letter to a girl, and she replies like that. How vicious people are. Calling me a creep? Me? The pain continued with greater intensity, of course. But he decided to try something else to see if he could relieve the pain. This time he was going to change his employment. He worked at what he considered crummy little work down at a factory. So he went through the newspaper and saw ads for employment and wrote a letter of application for a new kind of work. A few days, the letter came back. He opened it, and in polite but very formal language, it said, having reviewed your application, we feel you're not qualified to hold a position in our company. Very polite, but he knew what they were saying. Don't want to hire you. You're not good enough for us, something like that. At least that's the way he interpreted it. He boiled again, ripped that letter up, threw it away. A couple more weeks passed. He's going to try again. This time he noticed an ad in the paper which showed a large ballroom, which there were men and women of his age about, dancing around, waltzing out in the ballroom, having a lot of fun. And what it was a social club. So he wrote them a letter and asked what's the qualifications for coming to your parties. Another rejection came back to him. Polite, but cold. It said, "We are not accepting any new members into our fun club for now." But he knew what that meant. He kind of sensed that the very way he wrote his application to the club, his inquiry, even his handwriting maybe, he kind of sensed that there was something wrong with it, and they had read his character, his nature, by seeing the very letter itself. He kind of sensed that that's why they turned him down, and that was just a polite, phony excuse to say that the membership roles were filled. Again, in rage, he tore the letter up, threw it away. Things got worse. The ache got worse. The suffering got worse. The inward turning got worse. Months went on, and he was looking at a paper one day, and he saw a small little ad that said at the top of it, "Solve your problems." Oh, that's what I've got. I've got problems. And it says, solve your problems. The problems of feeling hateful, the problem of wanting to approach a pretty girl, and then when I actually do, she turns me down. Of feeling thrashed by life, that's certainly a problem. Of feeling ashamed of myself and guilty and weak, of not knowing how to handle my life. Man, I've got problems. So he wrote a little note to the address of the place that said, "Solve your problem." In a few days, some literature came back. And he looked at it with interest, and it had little quotations from great teachers, from philosophers. And it was kind of interesting. Some of the quotations said, "You are responsible for your own life. If you'll take that responsibility, things will change." It said, "Bitterness is self-punishment." Hey, that's right, I'm bitter, and I sure feel punished, so I guess that's a right statement. I never ever thought of it before, but it's certainly accurate. Filled with little short items like that that aroused something in him that he hadn't felt in a long, long time. But most curious of all, among the literature was a little note from the head of this self-development group, which it was. And the letter said, "Dear Mr. Jones, I'm going to give you a coded sentence in this letter. In code. And if you can solve this code, everything will change. You will indeed solve all your problems just as we promised in the class." Looked curiously at the letter, and sure enough, a little farther on, there was a coded sentence. It was in regular English language and in letters, words that he recognized. The letters he recognized, not the words, and he understood what it was. It was a code with transposed letters and maybe spaces where there shouldn't be spaces in the uncoded sentence. So he studied it, and he said, "This is interesting. If I know what they're telling me, they're giving me my first lesson. They're saying if I will do a little work for myself, I will solve the code, and I'll see what the message is in it, and that message will help me." This is great. I like this. So he sat down, looked at the code carefully, tried to figure it out. Couldn't do it. As hard as he tried, he couldn't make sense out of the sentence. So he said, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to take my responsibility for this and carry it on until I solve the secret message. So he went to the library, and every library has at least a small section of books on how to decode messages, secret codes throughout the ages, titles like that. So he got several of them out, brought them home, studied them. And the first thing he found out that the code was really very simple, very elementary. And there was a section in one of the books that described simple codes in the English language. We studied and studied, but he still didn't get it. And he was yearning to. He kind of felt there was something very important hidden in that coded message. So he brought the books back and set the code aside for a little bit, not abandoning it, but just to give his mind a little bit of a rest. And then he got thinking. He noticed in the literature that this group had sent to him that they had classes. They announced time and place where they had classes in inner development, how to find yourself, how do you solve your problem. And he said to himself, I'll go to a class to see what it's all about. And then he said, no, I won't go to a class to see what it's all about. And he said, I think I'll go. And then he said, I don't want to go. And this battle raged on, back and forth, inside him. And he tried to think of all kind of excuses why he shouldn't go, and he found them. Well, the weather isn't quite right. Or I might miss that program I like to watch so well on a particular night. Finally, he couldn't stay away any longer, so one night he got in his car. He wasn't quite sure how to dress. It said informal. That helped a little. So he dressed sort of uniformly and drove up. And there was a building there. And he looked around at some of the faces of the people he saw coming in and out of the building. And he almost turned around and went away. But he decided to brave it. So he got out. As he did, very nice. A very nice thing happened. One of the men came out and said, hi, I'm so-and-so, introduced himself. I guess your first night here? He said, yeah. Come on in. He brought him in, introduced him to 2 or 3 people. It was kind of nice. Not bad at all. Stayed at the class. And he heard more of what he had read in the literature, and he got more excited about, more encouraged about it. So at the end of the meeting, he went home, and he didn't come back for 6 months. Because at the same time he was inwardly excited at what he had heard at that meeting, another overwhelming part of him said, you're going to get your feelings injured if you come back there. You're getting into dangerous territory. Look how safe you are now. He shook his head. He said, I'm not safe now, and I know it. I'm in a very dangerous inner territory. So after 6 months, he came back again. And then he went out, and he stayed away for 3 months. And he came back again, and he stayed away for a month. And he came back again and stayed away for a week. And one time he came to a meeting. And this is about the 10th meeting he was at, something like that. And right in the middle of the lecture, during the first half of the meeting, right in the middle of it, he put his hand to his forehead like that. And he said, I've got it. I've got it. I know what the secret code is. I know from myself what it means. Because he had been studying that note for a long, long time. He even knew the number of words in it. There were 9 words in the message. And he sat back. And he breathed the message to himself. And stunned, overwhelmed, he said it out loud to himself. And he said to himself, our class aim is to heal, not to hurt. Our class aim is to heal, not to hurt. He knew all along that the people in that group knew all about him, even before they met him. Whoever took his letter that he had written, first of all, to them, this self-improvement class, whoever took it knew all about him. When they stuffed the envelope to mail him back the literature, they knew all about him. They understood him as he didn't understand himself. All along they knew. And this was what they were trying to get over to him, because they knew. They knew this is the way everybody is. The class aim is to heal, not to hurt. We know you've been hurt. Now I'm talking to you in this class, which is the same as the class he came to, of course. The truthful part of any of us, the clear part, the understanding part, knows with great clarity that we've been hurt so badly we won't risk getting hurt again. If we can get through to ourselves, first of all, of course, right? Get through to ourselves that truth, reality, want to call it God. God is not like that woman. She was vicious. She recognized that man's weakness and she took advantage of it. And she wrote that sharp note with great devilish pleasure, knowing how it would hurt him. That's how sick she was. She was as sick as he was. But we can see that truth is not that woman. Truth is not any of these experiences we've had where we've been bopped, slammed, thrashed by life. Truth is something of a different nature. This world, this society, that husband, that wife, those kids, those children, all of society has to hurt. Our hurt spirit must reproduce itself outwardly. That's what it is. Why do you expect a vicious tiger to behave in any other way except as a vicious tiger? That's its nature. The tigers know how to smile. Tigers know how to promise you something thinking they're going to give you something. And they're ready to tear you apart, aren't they? And that has happened to you. And you've been hurt. We've all been hurt. There is hope. There's the possibility of rescue for anyone, no matter how badly, how many times he's been rejected and hurt by this world. If you'll try to solve the secret message that truth is trying to get over, of which I gave you a single example in a single sentence. What's your position right now then? Please don't waste your time that you have here on earth by staying away for 6 months and then going to 3 and 2. Why don't you come all the time now? And that's just part of it. Of course, you're only here for a few hours a week. Why don't you take the illustration that you've just heard, take it home, and see where you're not applying yourself to understanding the coded message that truth is trying to get through to you, so that you understand from your heart that the class aim is not to hurt, but to heal. I repeat, truth is different from falsehood. It's different from human behavior, human attitudes, human aggressiveness, human hostility. It doesn't have anything to do with trying to hurt you, but because we've been hurt so much, we take it as that, which means you can't begin to see the difference between truth and falsehood. You can't see it yet. You put them all in one basket. And when new people come here, this is what they're doing. They come here and they hear the lectures or hear comments, and they're quite sure down inside that we're out to hurt them again. And that's why they go and don't come back. You're not going to hurt me again. This room is not the world. The attitudes in this class, to our own degree of cosmic comprehension, the attitudes in this class is not the attitudes of that hostile, vindictive world. It's different. But you've got to come and you've got to work and you've come to see for yourself that what you now think is trying to hurt you is trying to heal the hurt. How do you get it? You get it by submitting, by staying here and trembling. You can't tremble in this class if you go out of that door. If you go out of that door, you'll stop trembling because you've removed yourself from the truth that you take as being an enemy. If you go out, the crisis is over, and you've got to keep it going by being right here, by exposing yourself right now as you're hearing me talk, so that right while you're hearing me talk, you will get a jolt. But after the jolt, you will either physically or invisibly at some time put your hand to your forehead, and you'll say, I see. The class aim is to heal, not to hurt.